You don't fail with money because you lack knowledge. There's a mental pattern that operates before any financial decision, before any strategy, before any action. This pattern doesn't appear in courses, isn't found in investment books, and you never see it directly. But it determines every result you get with money. It's active now, while you process these words. And the fact that you don't perceive it is exactly what keeps it in control. Most people believe wealth results from correct information applied at the right time. That you simply need to learn the method, follow the steps, maintain consistency. This belief seems logical, seems fair, but observing people who possess the same information and produce completely opposite results reveals something deeper. It's not what you know that determines what you accumulate. It's what happens inside you at the exact moment you need to act on what you know. There's a layer of mental processing that precedes any financial behavior. This layer isn't emotional. It isn't just limiting belief or childhood trauma. It's an automatic response system your mind constructed over years, fed by thousands of silent micro-decisions. Every time you choose comfort over productive discomfort, every time you postpone an action you know is necessary, every time you rationalize a decision that contradicts your stated intention, you're reinforcing this system. And it becomes stronger, faster, more invisible. You've noticed how certain decisions seem to happen on their own. You decide to save. The intention is clear. But when the moment comes to execute, something inside you finds a perfect justification to delay. The justification is always reasonable, always makes sense in context. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice the justification emerges after the emotional decision has already been made. Your mind isn't helping you think. It's helping you avoid feeling the discomfort of acting against your established pattern. This is the invisible mechanism. Your mind interprets any pattern change as threat, not physical threat. Threat to identity, threat to internal coherence. You've constructed an image of who you are, and each action that contradicts this image generates cognitive tension. So your mind, trying to protect you, creates narratives that eliminate the tension without requiring you to change. And these narratives are always convincing, because they use real facts from your life to justify remaining in the known pattern. When you look at wealthy people, you see the final result. You see the decisions that worked, the investments that grew, the businesses that prospered. But you don't see the moment before the decision. You don't see the absence of internal hesitation. You don't see how these people's minds don't produce self-sabotage narratives at the critical moment. They're not more intelligent. They don't have access to secret information. They simply don't possess the mental pattern that transforms productive discomfort into justification for inaction. Now observe your own financial behavior over the last 6 months. Not the big decisions, the small ones, the ones you didn't even notice you were making. Each impulse purchase that seemed insignificant, each subscription you maintained through inertia, each earning opportunity you saw clearly but didn't pursue, each conversation about money you avoided, each time you chose immediate entertainment over long-term construction. These weren't isolated failures. They were manifestations of the same recurring pattern, a pattern your mind executes automatically, without consulting you. The central question isn't how to earn more money. The question is why you repeat behaviors you know don't lead to wealth. You already know spending less than you earn is essential. You already know investing early makes a difference. You already know developing valuable skills increases your earning capacity. But knowing doesn't change behavior. Because behavior doesn't come from conscious knowledge. Behavior comes from the dominant mental pattern. And the dominant mental pattern isn't under your conscious control. This explains why you can watch dozens of videos about finance, read books, take courses, and still not change your financial situation. Each new piece of information enters your mind and gets processed by the existing pattern. If the pattern says wealth isn't for you, then your mind will use each new piece of information to confirm that conclusion. If the pattern says you're not disciplined enough, then your mind will transform each strategy into another example of something you can't execute. The pattern doesn't block information. It blocks change. Now think of something you've been postponing for months. It could be starting to invest. It could be raising your prices. It could be pursuing a promotion. It could be learning a new skill. You know you should do it. You even know how to do it, but you don't do it. And if you observe with brutal honesty, you'll notice there's always an internal story that justifies the delay. This story changes depending on context. Sometimes it's lack of time. Sometimes it's lack of money. Sometimes it's fear of failure. Sometimes it's doubt about the right strategy. But the story's function is always the same: keep you in the known pattern. What makes this mechanism so effective is that it operates in the language of logic. You don't feel like you're self-sabotaging. You feel like you're being prudent, realistic, responsible. Your mind presents inaction as wisdom, and because the narrative makes rational sense, you accept it. You don't realize that behind the apparent logic exists only automatic resistance to identity change. People who accumulate wealth don't possess more willpower. They possess less internal resistance. When an opportunity emerges, their minds don't produce 10 reasons not to act. When action is necessary, they don't enter internal negotiation. This doesn't mean they don't feel fear or uncertainty. It means fear and uncertainty don't transform into paralysis. Their mental pattern doesn't interpret discomfort as danger signal. It interprets discomfort as natural part of the growth process. You can observe this pattern in real time, right now, in this moment. Notice how your mind is processing these words. If what's being said contradicts the narrative you carry about yourself, your mind will start producing objections. We'll want to find exceptions. We'll want to categorize this as oversimplification. We'll want to protect the version of you that justifies current results. This reaction isn't you thinking, it's the pattern defending itself. The grand illusion is believing you need a new method, a different strategy, more information, a mentor, a better course. None of this changes the pattern, because the pattern isn't at the method level. It's at the automatic response level. And as long as the automatic response continues generating narratives that justify inaction, no strategy will work. You'll start with enthusiasm. You'll follow the steps for a few days, and then the pattern will resume control. So subtly you won't even notice. You'll simply stop, and you'll have a perfectly reasonable explanation for why you stopped. This isn't moral judgment. It isn't character weakness. It's mental mechanics. Every human being possesses automatic patterns. The difference lies in which patterns were reinforced over time. If you spent years reinforcing the pattern of seeking immediate comfort, that pattern will dominate your decisions. If you spent years reinforcing the pattern of tolerating productive discomfort, that pattern will dominate. And wealth isn't the result of isolated decisions. It's the result of which pattern is in command when you need to choose between comfort and construction. Now think of someone you know who has much better financial results than yours. Don't compare the results. Compare the mental patterns. Observe how that person responds when an opportunity arises that requires immediate action. Observe how they handle uncertainty. Observe how much time they spend justifying why they can't do something versus simply doing it. Observe how they process criticism and feedback. Observe how they allocate time. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's absence of automatic internal resistance. The pattern that blocks wealth isn't a specific thought. It's a processing system. When you encounter a financial decision, this system activates automatically. It analyzes the situation not by the real opportunity, but by the level of discomfort the action will generate. If the action requires significant behavior change, the system classifies it as high risk, and then it starts producing logical justifications to avoid the risk. These justifications don't seem like self-sabotage. They seem like intelligent protection, and you believe them because they use rational language. You've noticed how easy it is to identify other people's financial errors, but extremely difficult to identify your own. This happens because when you observe from outside, you see the pattern clearly. But when you're inside your own pattern, you only see the justifications. Your mind presents each decision as unique, as contextual, as reasonable given the circumstances. It doesn't let you see the repetition, and without seeing the repetition, you can't identify the pattern. Many people believe discipline is the answer, that you simply need to force yourself to do what needs to be done. But discipline without pattern change is just temporary resistance. You can force yourself for days, maybe weeks. But the pattern is always waiting. The moment you relax, it retakes control. Because the pattern doesn't tire. It doesn't need motivation. It's automatic. And automatic always defeats conscious effort in any long-term contest. The real question isn't what you should do differently. It's why you're not doing what you already know you should do. And the answer lies in the invisible pattern that interprets change as threat. Every time you try to act against the established pattern, your mind generates discomfort. Not physical discomfort, psychological discomfort. A subtle sensation that something is wrong, that you're risking too much, that you should wait a bit longer, that you're not ready. And then emerges the perfect narrative that eliminates the discomfort and justifies remaining in the known. This happens so frequently you don't even notice anymore. It's become part of your normal experience. You don't see how each small daily choice is reinforcing the pattern that prevents wealth. Choosing entertainment over learning, choosing comfort over challenge, choosing avoidance over confrontation, choosing justification over responsibility. Each choice seems isolated, but they're all serving the same pattern, and the pattern strengthens each time you obey it. Now observe how much time you spend thinking about money versus how much time you spend acting on money. Most people spend hours thinking, planning, worrying, wishing, and minutes acting, because thinking doesn't activate the resistance pattern. Thinking is safe, acting isn't. Acting requires you to confront the discomfort, and your mental pattern was built specifically to avoid that confrontation. Wealthy people don't think less, they act more. The proportion between thought and action is different. When they identify something that needs to be done, the time between identification and execution is short, not because they're impulsive, because their minds don't produce 10 layers of internal objections before allowing action. Their mental pattern is configured for execution, not protection. You can test this now. Think of a specific financial action you know you should take today. Not something big, something simple. Checking an investment opportunity, sending a work proposal, canceling a subscription you don't use, negotiating a price. Just observe what happens in your mind when you consider actually doing this today. Notice how many objections arise, how many reasons appear to delay, how many conditions need to be met first. This is the pattern operating in real time. The difference between you and someone financially successful isn't in the knowledge that person possesses. It's in the absence of all that mental noise between intention and action. That person's mental pattern doesn't generate automatic objections, so action happens naturally, and because action happens repeatedly, results accumulate, not through exceptional talent, through absence of internal resistance. Now consider how many times you've already decided to change your financial situation. How many times you've already committed to saving more, earning more, investing better. And how many times the old pattern retook control without you noticing. You started well, followed the plan for some time, and then gradually returned to previous behavior. Not through lack of will, because the automatic pattern is stronger than conscious intention. And you weren't changing the pattern. You were just trying to temporarily override it with effort. This explains why real financial transformation is rare. Not because it's complex, because it requires change at the automatic pattern level. And pattern change doesn't happen through decision. It happens through different conscious repetition. You need to act against the pattern so many times that a new pattern forms. But to do this, you first need to see the old pattern. See how it operates. See how it disguises itself as logic. See how it uses your own voice to convince you not to change. The trap is believing you can reason your way out of the pattern. That understanding the problem will solve the problem. But intellectual understanding doesn't change automatic pattern. You can perfectly understand how the pattern functions and still obey it, because it doesn't operate at the conscious thought level. It operates at the instinctive response level. An instinctive response isn't altered by comprehension. It's altered by repeated exposure to the situation that triggers the response, followed by different behavior. This means there's no quick solution. There's no magic insight that dismantles the pattern instantly. The pattern was built through thousands of repetitions over years. It can only be undone through thousands of different repetitions. But these repetitions only happen if you start seeing the pattern when it's active. If you start recognizing the internal sensation that precedes the justification. If you start perceiving the exact moment when your mind is about to generate the narrative that will prevent you from acting. This is the leverage point. Not in the final result, not in the financial strategy, in the microscopic moment between impulse and action. In that moment, the pattern is vulnerable. In that moment, you can choose differently, but only if you're conscious enough to notice the moment has arrived. Most people never notice. They simply feel the impulse and obey, and then they create the story that explains why obeying was the intelligent choice. People who accumulate wealth perceive that moment. They're not immune to internal resistance, but they recognize when it arises, and because they recognize it, they can choose not to obey. Each time they choose not to obey, the old pattern weakens slightly, and each time they act despite the resistance, a new pattern strengthens. Over time, the resistance diminishes. Not because they became stronger, because the pattern changed. You're processing these words now through your existing pattern. If the pattern is defensive, you'll find reasons to dismiss what's being said. If the pattern is open, you'll start recognizing situations from your own life. But in both cases, the pattern is operating. And the only way to see the pattern operating is to observe your own mind while it processes information that challenges your current narrative. This isn't philosophical exercise. It's practical observation. Each thought that arises in your mind now is the pattern's product. If you're agreeing easily, the pattern is permitting because it sees no threat. If you're resisting internally, the pattern is defending itself. If you're looking for exceptions, the pattern is trying to maintain control. None of these reactions is you. They're all manifestations of the automatic system trying to maintain internal coherence. The question then becomes, is it possible to operate outside the pattern? And the answer is yes, but not the way most people imagine. You don't eliminate the pattern. You build sufficient awareness to see when it's active, and in that visibility, choice emerges. Not easy choice loaded with discomfort, because choosing against the pattern always generates discomfort. But it's productive discomfort. It's the discomfort of real change. This explains why methods that promise easy wealth always fail. They try to bypass the discomfort. They try to offer path without resistance. But wealth doesn't exist in path without resistance. Wealth exists on the other side of internal resistance. And the only way to cross the resistance is to stop avoiding it. Stop looking for the method that won't hurt. Stop waiting for the moment when you'll feel ready. You'll never feel ready. The pattern will never give permission. Action needs to happen despite the pattern, not after the pattern agrees. Now mentally review the last 3 months of your financial life, not the external events, the internal events. How many times you had a clear impulse to do something financially constructive and didn't do it? How many times you saw an opportunity and let it pass? How many times you knew exactly what you needed to do and chose to do something else? And more important, how many times you didn't even notice you were choosing? How many times the choice happened so automatically it seemed not to have been a choice? This is the pattern's evidence, not in grand dramatic failures, in thousands of invisible micro-choices that direct you consistently away from productive discomfort. And because each choice is small, you don't perceive the accumulated effect. You don't see how each small avoidance is constructing the financial result you don't want. You only see the final result and wonder why it doesn't change. The pattern that blocks wealth isn't lack of ambition. Many ambitious people remain poor. It's not lack of intelligence. Many intelligent people have mediocre financial results. It's not lack of opportunity. Opportunities are available in abundance to anyone with internet access. The pattern that blocks wealth is automatic resistance to doing what's uncomfortable now to have what you want later. And this resistance manifests not as obvious laziness, but as intelligent justification. Your mind is extremely skilled at creating narratives that transform self-sabotage into prudence. It takes your legitimate fears and amplifies them until they seem like valid reasons not to act. It takes your reasonable doubts and transforms them into paralysis disguised as caution. It takes your desire for comfort and repackages it as need for balance. And because the language is always reasonable, you believe it. You don't see you're being manipulated by the very system that should be serving you. This is what makes real financial change so difficult. It's not market complexity. It's not lack of resources. It's that you're fighting against an internal system that was designed to keep you exactly where you are. And this system is faster, stronger, and more persistent than your conscious intention to change. The only way to win isn't fighting harder. It's making the system visible. Because once visible, it loses power. When you start seeing the pattern operating in real time, something shifts. Not immediately, not dramatically, but you start noticing the gap between what you say you want and what you actually do. You start noticing how many of your decisions are really non-decisions, automatic responses disguised as conscious choices, and in that perception, a space opens, a space where real choice becomes possible. The invisible pattern that blocks wealth operates before you think about money. It's in how you process discomfort, in how you interpret uncertainty, in how you respond to opportunity, in how you allocate your attention. It determines whether you'll act or procrastinate, whether you'll persist or quit, whether you'll confront or avoid. And because it operates before conscious decision, you don't see its influence. You only see the result and assume it was your choice. But it wasn't. It was the pattern choosing through you, and it will continue choosing until you develop capacity to observe it while it operates. Not afterward, not in retrospect, in the exact moment when it's generating the automatic response that will determine your next financial action. In that moment, real power exists. Power to choose differently, power to act against the impulse, power to build new pattern through conscious repetition. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about stopping blindly obeying the system your mind built to protect you from change. The system isn't evil. It was useful at some point, but now it's preventing you from reaching what you say you want. And it will continue preventing until you stop negotiating with it, until you stop looking for the method that will satisfy it, until you accept that real change will always generate internal resistance, and that crossing that resistance is the price of transformation. You don't fail with money because you lack knowledge. You fail because you automatically obey an invisible mental pattern that interprets change as threat and produces intelligent justifications to keep you stopped. And now that you know this, nothing changes, unless you start observing the pattern when it's active, unless you start recognizing the internal sensation that precedes avoidance, unless you start acting despite the resistance, not after it disappears. The pattern is operating now. It always has been. It always will be. The difference between where you are and where you want to be isn't strategy. It's awareness of the pattern and refusal to obey it.